Hello, my friends, and welcome to Embracing What is Real. I'm your host, Helane Lipson. Embracing What's Real is the forum to explore the nature of reality and the impact our current belief systems have on our lives. All of our deep-rooted old beliefs are what many of us use to judge ourselves and our actions. Our current belief systems impact every single choice we make. So when we feed our spirit with new, empowering ideas about the meaning of life, the meaning of our lives change. Today, I am so excited to welcome our special guest, Darryl Anka. Darryl began to communicate through trance channeling with an extraterrestrial entity called Bashar in 1983. He describes Bashar as existing in a parallel reality in a time frame that we perceive as the future. The monologues and dialogues with Bashar cover a wide range of topics, including human psychology, planetary evolution, metaphysics, and extraterrestrials. In this interview, we'll talk to Darryl about his work and what the messages from Bashar mean to our species in these times. I cannot wait another minute. Let's say hello to our special guest, Darryl Anka. Hello, Darryl.
Hello, Helane. Thank you very much for having me here.
Oh, I'm so happy you can be here with us today on Embracing What's Real.
My pleasure.
Something I recently learned about you. I read that you had a career in Hollywood as a visual and special effects artist, and you worked on Star Trek, the motion picture, iRobot, Pirates of the Caribbean, Live Free or Die Hard, Iron Man. After that, you even started working as a producer and a writer. So what happened that you decided to make this transition to make your life's work helping people awaken and evolve by channeling the entity Bashar?
Well, both of these things started about the same time in parallel. I had been in special effects for a little while before I started channeling, but I also made the transition to writing, directing, and producing because I understood that storytelling is an extremely powerful way to get information across. And after having channeled Bashar since 1983, I realized that a lot of the information that he was delivering could be put into different ideas, different story concepts, and put out as films, and would be a different way to get some of the information out to people aside from the channeling. So both my film career and the channeling career, I find, actually work very well in parallel with each other.
Are you still doing films, and are you still doing this film work?
I'm not doing the special effects. I have shifted over to writing, directing, producing. I've actually just finished recently my first film as a writer, director, producer called Dearly Departed. It's a fictional documentary we shot as if we took a camera into the spirit world and interviewed the spirits of dead people to get their take on life after death. So this is actually at the very early stages of my career as a writer, director, producer, but I did the special effects work for almost 30 years.
Wow, incredible. Are you actually in the film?
No. It is a fictional documentary. We interview actors who are playing the parts of spirits on the other side. I am working with April at Bashar Communications now on the early stages of developing a film about how I became a channel and about who Bashar is, and we're actually talking about doing both a narrative fictional film representing that whole journey. At the same time, we'll also probably do a real-life, behind-the-scenes documentary on how I became a channel and what Bashar is all about, and put both of those films out together.
Oh, I cannot wait to see it. So, now I have a question for you. What happens to you, Darryl Anka, when you're channeling Bashar? Like, where do you go?
I don't really go anywhere. It's more of an altered state of consciousness. It's like falling into a kind of a very strong, energetic daydream. I get images, I get feelings, I don't hear the words. It's similar to the idea that if you're in a really strong daydream and you're focused in that daydream and somebody walks in the room and they call your name, it's like they have to call your name 5 times before you actually hear them. It's like that. The words are so far away that they really don't register with me. And I'm having my own experience, and I know that information is getting downloaded into me in the way I need to understand it, but I don't really remember or focus on how the translation coming through from Bashar's thoughts are translating into the words that people in the audience are actually hearing. I'm having my own experience. Another analogy I kind of use is that normally, when we're moving around in our daily lives, let's say we're driving our vehicle, we're driving the car. When Bashar makes the connection with me telepathically, it's like I move over into the passenger seat and now he's behind the wheel. So I don't really have to pay attention to the road anymore, and I don't really know how we're getting where we're going. I'm just sort of looking out the side window and enjoying the ride, but I have no recollection afterwards of how we got there. It's sort of similar to that idea.
Well, how did you come to have this relationship with Bashar?
Well, this was all really started about 1973 when I had 2 very close broad daylight UFO sightings here over Los Angeles where I live. The first time about maybe 150 feet away, the second time only about 70 feet away, both times a equilateral black triangular ship, about maybe 20, 30 feet on a side. After seeing something like that, I began doing all sorts of research and investigation into UFOs and other metaphysical concepts, and eventually came across the idea of channeling. And 10 years after the sightings, I was actually introduced to a channel who was conducting seminars at that time, and I attended them for a few months doing my research and listening to the information, and I thought that the information was very helpful to people in a variety of ways. But eventually the entity coming through that channel actually offered to teach a channeling class. And I went into the class not because I thought I was going to be a channel. I just wanted to further my research, and I wanted to understand how something like channeling could be taught, because I always thought it was just sort of something that just happened to someone, and it wasn't the product of actually learning any kind of technique. But in the class, which was a series of different kinds of meditations and mental exercises to put you in different altered states, at one point in the class, I received what I perceived to be a telepathic connection from Bashar and his people, and in that one instant, an actual memory came back of having made an agreement to do this with him before this life. And I understood in that moment that the UFO had been shown to me on purpose to get me to start moving in the direction I needed to move, so that when this time came, I would be ready. And the question that was there was, now that you know we made this agreement and now you know it's time to begin, is this something you still want to do? I had to think about it for a while, because at first I really wasn't sure if I was just hallucinating or if it was a side effect of the meditations. But I eventually got enough outside validation to let me know that something real was happening. And I also, by that time, also understood that it really didn't matter whether Bashar was, in a sense, a separate being or whether this was just another portion of my own consciousness. What the bottom line for me is, does the information help? Does it work? Does it make a difference in people's lives? And I thought that for that reason alone, I would go ahead and continue to practice the channeling, and I got many opportunities to do so. And as I became more and more public, word of mouth spread, and one thing kind of led to another, and here I am almost 30 years later still channeling public events.
Yeah, they are fabulous. Now, I've seen so many of your videos as you're channeling Bashar, and one of my favorite videos of yours is the Sacred Circuitry video, where, Bashar presents 15 symbols for us to look at and marinate in and resonate with. Do you also do some of the exercises like this that Bashar suggests?
Well, remember that when he's channeling through me, I get the full brunt of that energy. I get that exercise, in a sense, embedded right into my consciousness, even if I don't really hear how he's translating through into words to the audience. So I don't necessarily need to do them after the fact because I can sort of get into that altered state by just remembering what that felt like when that information was coming through.
And even though you're not hearing it, you have a sense of knowingness after he speaks about everything that he was talking about.
I always get the basic concepts behind everything he's talking about. I just don't remember how it was actually framed in words.
Now, are you affected by outer interference like chemtrails, archons, the negative energy that other people emit? Or is there some additional protection you receive as someone who can channel this multidimensional energy? Like, does channeling Bashar keep you in a continually higher frequency where you're not as affected?
I think to some degree it does, but I wouldn't use the words protected because in a sense that implies sort of a fearful state of being, of needing protection from something. And part of what Bashar always talks about is the idea that everything is an energy state, everything is a frequency, and fear is also a frequency. So by looking or labeling something in a negative way, it's actually lowering the frequency and making you more susceptible to that reality. So the idea of knowing what experience I have and knowing what energy state that channeling experience represents to me, the more I choose to stay in that state, the more I simply know that I can only experience the things that are representative of that state. And even if I can observe something going on, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will affect me in a negative way as long as I remain in a state that is conducive to a positive reality. So I understand that principle and do my best to remain as close as possible to the energy state that I'm in when I actually am channeling him. Because to me, that's the state that represents our true self. And if people can allow themselves to be in that energy state, then whatever energy they put out, whatever frequency they put out, is what determines how anything in reality will affect them regardless of what's going on.
Yeah. And I imagine being able to internalize or download some of the overall general concepts of his messages probably keeps you very uplifted.
Yes,
and you'd remember your purpose and why you're here. So faith over fear makes sense.
Yes, and it's really about what you believe to be true. Bashar explains very clearly that our physical reality experience is truly based on what we believe is most likely to be true. And so it's really all about getting in touch with those beliefs and making sure that those beliefs are in keeping and in alignment with who we prefer to be rather than who we don't prefer to be.
Yeah. Now, I've seen so many of your videos, so many, and I noticed in some of the most recent programs when channeling Bashar that you're not willing to answer some of the in-depth questions about the reptilians or the other negative energies. Why is that?
Bashar has recently recognized that, again, a lot of people get caught up in these things in a very fearful way. And so he always wants to put forth an understanding of how to treat all these things from a positive point of view. So he will very rarely give time to the idea of reinforcing people's fears about certain things. He will always attempt to seek a positive way to look at what's going on in reality and help people not get caught up in the things that he feels lower their frequencies and lower their vibrations. So there are certain things he will simply not address in depth because he feels it doesn't serve us to allow ourselves to sort of get stuck in those mindsets.
And it's true, though, when you start thinking about reptilians and you start thinking about those things, it doesn't bring you to a higher place at all.
No, and so in a lot of ways he feels he would be doing us a disservice if he dwelt on those things too much.
Yeah. Now, so Bashar comes from a parallel reality 300 years in the future. So what was the primary reason that he decided to come back in time to communicate with us now? Like, what was his primary purpose?
Well, first of all, one way to look at this, even though he talks about the idea of all lives existing simultaneously, the idea that he's in the future is just a perspective, and that parallel reality exists at the same time that ours does. Another way to understand this from a linear perspective, let's say reincarnationally, is that he is one of my future incarnations and I'm one of his past lives. So in that sense, you could say we're the same soul in two different frames of reference. So the idea here is that there is a shift going on the planet now. In consciousness, there's an awakening, more awareness, more expansion of consciousness. So now is the time that's kind of ripe for delivering a lot of these different perspectives, a lot of these different ideas of how it is we can know that we are creating our reality, how it is we can take more responsibility for the experiences we have in life, how we can make changes in a positive way. And so, in a sense, he knows this is the perfect time to deliver this information in a way that we can best use it to make the kind of changes and create the kind of reality experience that we have said for a long time we prefer. But now we have arrived at the time where we can actually take the actions and make the changes that will actually give us, that will actually create the kind of reality we have for so long said we would like to start experiencing. So he's helping us with that.
So 300 years in the future. Have you seen that reality, Darryl? Like what?
I have seen images that are representative of whatever it is he talks about when he comes through. So that's one of the reasons I enjoy the channeling so much, is that if he does talk about, let's say, his civilization, or he talks about different probable realities that may happen on the earth, I get to see images and feel what that's like. And that's one of the reasons why we want to make a movie about Bashar and the channeling and all that, because we can depict in the movie what it is I'm actually seeing in my head when he's talking about these things. And I think that that would be really exciting for people to be able to see if we can create representations of those images.
So, Darryl, what has become of the Earth 300 years in the future?
Well, first of all, understand that as Bashar explains this idea, there's really no such thing as the future. There are an infinite number of probable future realities all existing at the same time. It's really up to us to determine what kind of future we want to have by the choices we make now. And as we make choices, we're constantly shifting to different parallel Earths that are more representative of the choices that we're making, vibrationally speaking. So there is no one fixed future. However, in the idea that Bashar is communicating with us in this way, it's indicative of the idea that he's connected to us in a parallel reality of the Earth that is representative of something that is far more peaceful, far more creative, far more loving, and in that way, we can say that as long as we stay in the vibration that he represents, we will shift ourselves to a parallel Earth and have the kind of an experience we would call a much more positive, much more constructive, much more creative future. So it's really all about what's going on at the present, because from Bashar's perspective, there's no such thing as a prediction of the future. There is only a sensing of the energy that exists at the present when the prediction is made. And if that energy doesn't change, then that will come to pass. But if it does change, we will have a very different experience. So it's up to us to decide what energy we prefer, to stay in that energy, and to constantly shift into parallel versions of Earth that are only reflective of the energy we prefer instead of the energy that we don't.
Yeah. So here we are, divine beings, born now in this matrix existing here on Earth, and so many of us have forgotten what our missions were. What tools does Bashar suggest that can help us remember who we are and why we're here?
Well, the primary thing in his messages, the bottom line, let's say, of all of his information is the most important thing we can do is to act every single moment that we possibly can on whatever contains the highest amount of joy, the highest amount of excitement. And this is more than just a metaphysical idea. He's saying this is actually physics, because excitement to him is our body's physical translation or physical interpretation of an actual energy state and a frequency of energy that is representative of our true core self. So anytime we're willing to act on things, on opportunities that come along, whatever they may be, no matter how big, no matter how small, on a daily basis, every moment, if we're willing to act and choose only those situations and only those opportunities that contain the highest excitement and always give positive meaning to whatever's going on, then we will generate that energy state for ourselves that is representative and most in alignment with our true selves, and that will allow us to attract more opportunities of that nature. It will allow us to be inspired with ideas and concepts we otherwise may not understand or not be capable of attracting to ourselves. And by staying in that state, we accelerate ourselves, we move forward in a positive way, and we stay in alignment and allow that excitement to attract opportunities that will help increase that excitement and increase more opportunities to act on that excitement. So the bottom line to him is to stay in that frequency that represents excitement, because that's truly who we are, and to always allow a positive meaning to be given to everything, because everything has a neutrality to it. Nothing has a built-in meaning automatically. The meaning we give it is the effect that it has in our lives. We are designed, in a sense, to give life meaning. Life without us has no meaning on its own. It is designed specifically to be blank, to be neutral, so that the meaning we give it determines the effect we get out of it. Those two ideas are key to a lot of the messages and a lot of the information he would like us to understand. At the same time, he says, your imagination is the conduit of communication between your physical mind and your higher mind. And whatever you are attracted to as a tool, as a ritual, as a technique, you're attracted to for a reason. It works for you in that moment. It's aligned with your belief system in that moment. That's why you're attracted to it. And he calls all tools and all techniques and all rituals permission slips. And generally speaking, anything you're attracted to as a technique, as a tool, is a permission slip that you're using to give yourself more permission to be more of who you are. So basically, anything that you feel works for you will work for you. And when that changes and it no longer works, you stop using it and you look around for what it is you are now attracted to, and then start doing that. And as long as you stay in the state where you're choosing things that are exciting to you, that you're attracted to, you will always be perfectly fulfilling your purpose and your mission, which is fundamentally the same for everyone, which is to be yourself as fully as you can. The way in which you express that purpose may be different for everyone. Some people may be singers, artists, business people. That doesn't matter. That's not specifically your mission or your purpose. That's the expression of your purpose. Your fundamental purpose, according to Bashar, is to be yourself, whatever that means, as fully as you can. And the best way to do that is by always being in the state that represents your true self, which is expressed by us in physical reality as excitement, love, joy, happiness.
It sounds so easy.
It is from his perspective, because from his perspective, this is all nothing more mysterious than physics. What you put out is what you get back.
It's interesting because I believe to some extent we're almost programmed. We are programmed. So I guess it's easy to stay positive and resonate at a high vibrational tone while we're at yoga class or we're watching a beautiful sunset. But what can people do to stay on a high vibrational frequency while they're experiencing stressful situations, difficult circumstances? What can they do to not subconsciously return to their old 3D programming?
Well, one of the things that Bashar talks about that really helps make a difference when you practice this is allowing yourself to really get a handle on paying attention to our definitions, to how we define things, because the definitions are equivalent to what we believe to be true. So it's very important to pay attention to how we're actually defining something, because it's only the definition that causes the experience. So if we're experiencing something as stressful, if we're experiencing something as difficult, if we're experiencing something as a struggle, it's not because the thing itself has those qualities. It's because we're imbuing that situation with those qualities by how we're defining it based on how we've been taught to think of things, how we've been taught to view things, and that's the programming that you're talking about. So the first thing to realize to unlock oneself from that program is to really change the definitions on all levels that don't work for you, that don't align with your highest excitement. For example, I actually give a couple of really good examples that Bashar talks about quite often. People are constantly looking at the issue of trust, and they're constantly looking at the issue of habits and patterns and wondering, like you said, how do we change these habits? How do we change these patterns? How do we learn to trust ourselves? How do we learn to trust our lives? From Bashar's perspective, the way we're framing that question is already putting us at a disadvantage, because we're already defining this idea of learning to trust, learning how to break habits, as being difficult. And the very idea, the very definition we have of a habit is that it's something difficult to change. From Bashar's perspective, that's not a definition that is positive. That's not a definition that works. From his perspective, in his experience, a habit is something you do that you don't know you're doing. Once you know you're doing it, once you know you have the habit, it's gone. In other words, the recognition that you have the habit is actually the end of the process of getting rid of it, not the beginning. And if you understand that the only way you can know you had a habit is to actually not have it anymore, is to be outside of it, is to be beyond it, then that can start you in a different state of understanding that it's how you define these things, how you define these concepts, that in most ways determines how you experience your life. The issue I talked about trust. Many people think that we have to learn how to trust things. We don't. We already trust in something all the time, 100% of the time. If we didn't trust in something, we would have no experience at all. So Bashar is basically saying, you don't have to learn how to trust, you just have to decide what it is you're trusting in. And by changing what the trust is in from a negative idea to a positive idea, then you're going to get that experience as opposed to the other experience. So it's really about watching those definitions and really being clear on how it is we may be automatically defining things, thinking and assuming that those definitions automatically come with the concept instead of recognizing that we're the ones putting that meaning into them, that the object or the situation or the circumstance by itself has absolutely no built-in meaning whatsoever. It's just a neutral, blank prop. When we give it meaning, that's when we start to experience the way we start to experience it. So if we catch ourselves and say, okay, wait a minute, I'm having a difficult experience here. What would I have to believe is true? What would I have to define is true about myself in relation to this experience that would allow me to experience it as difficult? When we start asking those kinds of questions and we listen carefully, we will start getting the answers. We will start having conscious recognition of what those definitions are that have been subconscious all this time. And when we find out what those definitions are and bring them into conscious recognition, we start to realize and start to understand that they have nothing to do with us, that we probably did pick them up from our parents, our friends, our society when we were growing up, and that they actually don't belong to us. They belong to other people, but we bought into them. And we believed they were true in order to survive. We took them on because we felt we had to in order to get along with our parents, in order to get along with our friends. And so we bought into these ideas. But now, as we mature, we begin to realize and discover that we've been carrying around belief systems that don't belong to us, that have nothing to do with our true frequencies. Yeah. And that's when we begin to realize, as Bashar sort of puts it in a humorous way, when we hold on to beliefs that don't belong to us, that makes us a belief thief. We're stealing other people's beliefs. We don't want to be thieves. We don't want to steal other people's beliefs. So it's time to drop them. They don't belong to us. It's time to give them back to where they came from and just let them go. Because when he says, when you finally identify a belief that is out of alignment with your true self, it will appear to be nonsensical. It will appear to be illogical because it doesn't belong to you. And as soon as it appears to make no sense that you should hold on to that belief, you will let it go.
Spot on, and brilliant. We are almost addicted to emotions. We don't even know why we're feeling what we're feeling or what is happening to us. And so it's to step out, and the emotions that we attach to particular situations and the beliefs that come along with the emotions are what put us in a tizzy. And that was that was so well said. That was so well said.
And it's understanding also that we can actually use our emotions to help us get in touch with those beliefs, because it's actually the other way around. It's the emotions that come along with the beliefs. You actually have the belief first, and the belief generates the feeling, which generates the thoughts, which generate our behavior. The idea is that you can actually use a feeling and trace it back to what the belief would have to be in order for you to feel the way you do. So by asking those questions, you can use those things and trace them back to discover what the beliefs are. And once you change the belief, the emotions will change, the thoughts will change, the behaviors will change all the way up and down the line. But it's the beliefs that are foundational, the definitions that are foundational. Once you change those, all the emotions will change with it. Because you can't actually have a feeling about something. You don't actually know how to feel about something unless you already have a definition of that thing. For something you don't have a definition for, you have no idea how to feel about it. So you can use the belief when you have a feeling of discomfort or doubt or anger. You can say, all right, what would I have to believe is true about myself in this situation in order to feel this way? And if you start examining with true openness and true honesty and true willingness to discover what that definition would have to be, something in your life will bring it to you. You'll either get it in your head or a synchronicity will happen to reveal it to you. Some way, shape, or form, somehow that information will come bubbling up. If you're, as long as you're not afraid of it and you're willing to allow it to come to the surface, it will come up. Fear really is like a friend knocking on your door saying, hey, I'm trying to bring your attention to something that's in your unconscious mind that you need to pay attention to here. I'm trying to bring your attention to a belief that you're holding on to that isn't yours, that's out of alignment with your truth. So fear is your friend, and anytime you feel it, it's like, thank you, fear, for bringing my attention to something I didn't know was there that I would prefer to change. And the second you use fear that way, it transforms into excitement, it transforms into curiosity, it transforms into the energy that gives you the ability to discover what that belief is and let it go.
So, on top of that, is it true that anyone can manifest anything like love, abundance, power, peace, if they're ready to receive it?
The things that are relevant to us, we can manifest. Things that are not relevant to our lives, probably we won't manifest. But the thing of it is that we all deserve love. We all deserve peace. We're all creative beings. We're all made in the image of creation. We all have the ability to manifest whatever the full expression of our being is as it relates to the themes that we chose to explore in this life and the expression of who it is we chose to be creatively. So all of those things are manifestable. The thing that I'd like that Bashar says about manifestation, and again this goes to how we define these things, is many people, when they talk about manifesting things, assume that when you manifest something, you've attracted something from somewhere else that you didn't already have. Bashar says that's not the case. Manifestation is not the attraction of something from somewhere else that you didn't have to where you are. It is the revelation of something. It's the making visible of something that has always been here. And it's just by getting into the appropriate state that suddenly you can see it. But it's never been anywhere but here. It's always here. It's always been here. And manifestation is just putting yourself in the appropriate state to allow what was heretofore invisible to become visible. But it's always been here. It's not coming from anywhere else. It's always been with you.
Wow, that's an interesting way to look at it. Now, I'm going to just switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
I've noticed that in some of your videos and programs, you have big crystals around you, big pointed crystals and semi-precious gemstones, and
Hmm.
they're said to be used back in the days of Atlantis and Lemuria. So, what do you know about the power of crystals, and how do these crystals help you in channeling Bashar in the programs, and how do we use crystals for our own spiritual evolution?
Well, I may surprise you a little bit by telling you that one of the main reasons the crystals are there is because they're pretty. It's because they look nice. They're inspiring. I understand again about the idea that obviously crystals are an embodiment of energy. Obviously, people can understand them from a technological point of view, and they have many uses. Certainly, one of them might be in the idea of focusing and amplifying and storing information and energy, and that's another reason why they might be there. But the idea, again, is to understand that regardless of what may be how they're thought of in terms of the physical world and how they can be used and how they can be expressed in physical reality, it still falls under the realm of what I already talked about when Bashar talks about permission slips. Everything is a permission slip. Every object, every tool, every technique, every ritual is a permission slip. But the idea is people that are attracted to crystals and use them in certain ways are attracted to them because their belief system aligns with that particular permission slip, and in aligning with it, what they're doing is they're allowing that crystal, that object, to be used as a trigger to give themselves permission to be more of who they are, to expand their consciousness. But the crystal isn't doing it. We are. We're just using the crystal as a way to reflect to us what we believe is possible within ourselves. It somehow is aligned with our belief system, and that object, for some reason, is vibrating at a frequency that's similar enough to our belief system that we allow it to let ourselves expand. So the crystals are there just to provide a mirror, a reflection, a permission slip, an idea, a representation, a symbol of all that is represented by energy, by consciousness, by frequency. They reflect light, which we are all made out of. It's all energy. And it's really a permission slip to allow us to decide how we want to use those things. In what way do they spark our imagination? In what way do they inspire us to raise our frequency, to become more, to expand ourselves in whatever way we're excited to? That's really what they're there for. They're just reminders that there's really no difference between those things and what we are as aspects, facets of the multidimensional crystal of creation.
Interesting. Now, I have another kind of abstract question, and it's about the moon.
Sure.
I'm interested in what it is. Was it created by ETs, or is it a natural celestial formation? And I'm interested in who or what is on or in the moon and how this energy affects us as a human collective.
All right. Well, I know that Bashar has talked a little bit about it. He has said, yes, it is a natural body. Our scientists now do, he said, pretty much have it correct that it was created by the collision of another large body with the primeval proto-Earth, and it split off from us. However, at the same time, he also did say there has been extraterrestrial involvement in adjusting the orbit of the moon in order to create a balanced state on the Earth, energetically, gravitationally, with the tides, so on and so forth, to make Earth optimal for life in a certain way. So he has said that there has therefore been activity and interactivity with the moon on the part of extraterrestrials in that way, and that there are certainly extraterrestrial bases that exist here and there on the moon. But it is a natural body that has been adjusted by extraterrestrial technology, according to Bashar, to help balance out the energy on the Earth and make things more conducive for the continuation of life.
Hmm. Is it hollow?
No, no. There are certainly, I think he said, areas in it that contain certain kinds of, I guess you could say, devices that help with the idea of balancing it out. But in that sense, there are large open areas in it, but it's not just like a thin, hollow shell. There is a definite interior to the moon, according to him.
That is interesting. Well, I also was wondering, what is Bashar's take on the message that dolphins and whales have for humanity?
He talks about this quite often, and one of the things he says is that dolphins, or at least some dolphins, are acting in a way as ambassadors because they give us an opportunity to learn to interact, in a sense, with an alien culture while we're still here on Earth. And it gives us practice for upcoming contact scenarios. They are, in a way, obviously another sentient species on the Earth that has evolved. And so we're living side by side with, another alien species right on our own planet. And how we learn to relate to them and how we learn to communicate with them is going to go a long way toward teaching us how to communicate and relate to other beings from other civilizations as well. He's talked about the idea that many dolphins are actually in telepathic contact with many extraterrestrial civilizations, including non-physical consciousness connected to the star system of Sirius. So he said, if you really want to up your vibration, go and interact with the dolphins because they can teach you very strongly through those interactions, through excitement, through play, and in a variety of ways, how to really expand your vibration and how to help you telepathically connect, not only to them, but to other extraterrestrial civilizations, particularly to the Sirius vibration.
Interesting. I love dolphins. I love dolphins. So I had to throw that in. Now, another one of these abstract questions I wanted to ask about veganism. I don't know, Darryl, if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, but
not strictly, no.
Okay, so
I follow my body consciousness. I eat relatively light. I mostly eat vegetables. Now and then my body tells me I need a little bit of protein, and so I will eat it in the form of either probably fish or chicken. I think really we all just have to follow what our body consciousness at our particular stage of evolution tells us is correct for us at this moment. I don't think any one way is more spiritual than another. If it's right for you to only eat vegetables, then it's right for you. If it's right for you to only, to have a little bit of meat protein, then it's right for you. I think the most important avenue is what's your relationship to that. If you are consuming things that are as natural, as organic, as, let's say, cruelty-free as they possibly can be, if you develop a relationship, if you are in gratitude for what you're receiving and you thank that food, for the service that it's doing for you, and you develop that kind of a relationship with it, then I think it's going to serve you in a positive way. If you truly believe that it's something you need to sustain yourself, then it will be provided to you in the most synchronistic, in the most beneficial way, in a state of grace, in a state of gratitude. Then in that context, I think it will still be beneficial to you no matter what it is that you're eating.
Okay, as long as we're in reverence.
Yes.
And honoring the animals that we would eat.
Yeah, now I think eventually we may evolve beyond that, but I don't think we should force it. To me, it's kind of a contradiction in terms to try and force ourselves to do something we think is more spiritual. If we are doing certain things because we are in anxiety, because we are in fear, because we have a belief in lack, and we're operating out of that energy, then yes, it's quite possible that if we change that energy, we will no longer have the urges for certain things that we now consume. But I think we have to get there naturally, and I think we have to change in a very natural, organic way. So if we do make those changes and suddenly lose the urge for certain things and feel like we just don't need them anymore, to me, then we've made those changes and changed our diet, changed our the way we go about doing things, the way we make choices in the most natural, organic way we possibly can. And I think that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah. And And you bring up, as you're answering this question, about how we're evolving, and
Sure.
it is an interesting time to be alive in 2012. So
It is.
I want to ask, is our DNA evolving now? I've heard that we have a two-stranded DNA. Is the double helix actually changing into a 12-stranded
Well,
DNA?
Bashar has explained this, and he said, first of all, it's not actually possible to have 12 strands of DNA in physical reality. You can connect to other energetic expressions of the idea of DNA on higher dimensional levels, and that can go even higher than 12. But he said that as far as an actual physicalization in the DNA physical strand itself, the most you can have in physical reality is actually 3 strands. So we're evolving toward that physically, but we're connecting to higher representations, higher dimensional expressions of the DNA energy that are non-physical. They will not manifest physically that way, but we will get the advantage of making those connections. We'll be able to express more energy through ourselves, through the DNA, through different aspects of our cellular being, through our atomic structure, as we upgrade our energy, as we accelerate our frequency. That's according to how he's explained it.
Now, as we're ascending, Darryl, are you also experiencing ascension symptoms?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, I experienced a lot of that, even just getting used to the idea of bringing Bashar's energy through, because his energy, at the beginning especially, was so much stronger than mine. I went through all sorts of symptomology of adjusting to that energy, and it actually took a couple of years for me to get used to even handling the energy coming through. I sometimes use the analogy that it was trying to get Hoover Dam to come through a garden hose. Yeah, I really needed to stretch and open and really let go of a lot of things, but until I did, I experienced a lot of that accelerated energy as aches and pains, flu-like symptoms, all sorts of different things that can actually be representative of an acceleration of energy. But it's experienced that way when there is resistance to that expansion. And as soon as we let go and let that energy through and stop resisting it, then it expands and those symptoms usually go away.
Yeah. That is so interesting, because many of us are experiencing these types of ascension symptoms, and these days with solar flares and this quickening now, it's becoming much more commonplace that people are talking about this and understanding it. So it's a beautiful thing to be headed in the right direction. And so today, here we are talking, and it's 9/11. So here we are on 9/11, 2012, 11 years after 9/11, an event known around the world. And I want to ask you, what does Bashar feel really happened? And what should each and every one of us take with us as far as learning and growth from what happened in New York City on September 11th, 2001?
He will not address what physically happened. What he has simply said is it's important to take that event and to recognize that it is the product of a combination of a lot of beliefs, a lot of choices that we've made, a lot of things that we've chosen to look at and not look at, that it's certainly the result of holding on to a lot of fear-based beliefs and letting them escalate out of scale, out of our control. And it is important to take events like that and see them as examples of what fear-based beliefs will ultimately result in. And to start really looking at the choices we're making, really start examining alternative ways of going about how we relate to one another, what kind of a world we really want, and how to make choices that will allow us all to move forward in a more beneficial, a peaceful, and constructive way. But we also have to look inward, because a lot of things that are reflected to us in the form we call enemies and attackers all have to do, in many ways, at its fundamental core, with issues of how we are afraid to look at things within ourselves. and we attack ourselves. And until such time, basically Bashar is saying, that we take a good, strong look inwardly at all the things that we've been afraid to look at, then we will constantly project those things outwardly and constantly see the reflection of those fears projected back at us by people that are susceptible to those kinds of vibrations. We have to stop thinking of ourselves with a victim mentality, and we have to really start empowering ourselves and empowering everyone to understand that when people try to force their point of view on someone else, when people attack other people, it's only because they actually, ironically, don't believe in the power of what they say they believe in. And if we can start teaching people around the world that people who truly believe in the power of their beliefs will never attack anyone, will never force themselves on anyone, will never be afraid of anything, because they will know what is true for them. And they will not have to run from anything. They will not have to be afraid to interact with anything. But they can also share and act as examples that those that truly believe in the power of their beliefs will never have to attack or force anything on anyone, because that's actually a sign of disbelief in the power of what you say you believe in. This is a very complex psychological idea. It goes, again, very deeply into what we believe about the world, what we've been taught to believe about the world, and it goes into understanding, again, that we can only shift to realities that are reflective of what we believe is most likely to happen and what it is that we're afraid to face. So the worlds that we shift to will always put us in touch with those things, and it's up to us to engage these things in much more positive ways, much more constructive ways, as self-empowered beings that truly believe in the power of positive reality, instead of trying to wrap ourselves, to protect ourselves from all of the negative things we think are trying to get to us, which will only get stronger and stronger unless we truly find our power within and express it in a much more positive way.
Wow, absolutely. When we see ourselves as vulnerable, we are.
Of course. Now, this doesn't excuse the perpetrators. It doesn't excuse the attackers, because it's their duty to also not be so weak that they succumb to those fears themselves, because people only attack others out of fear. They only attack because they themselves don't believe they are powerful. It's up to us to help people realize that everyone is so powerful that there is enough for everyone, that all beliefs are true, that every belief is simply another perspective of the same one creation, and that it all fits, it all works, it all belongs. Because if there was something that truly was not part of creation, it couldn't possibly exist.
Wow. That was actually, I mean, it's a lot to wrap your mind around.
That's okay.
but
Minds are very wrappable.
But Darryl, this has been an amazing interview. And as we're wrapping it up, is there a closing message that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think it's really about living your dreams instead of just dreaming about being alive. It's really taking the opportunity to act on your highest excitement, because when you do, with a full understanding that excitement will lead you to more excitement, and that's the vibration of your true self, your excitement will support you. If you don't believe it can, then don't change what it is you do believe will support you, because you must honor your belief system until such time as you're willing to change it and willing to believe that when you believe in your excitement, it can support you. But I guarantee you, because it's always worked for me and has never failed, anytime you truly act on your highest excitement knowing it will support you, it always will. So please don't hesitate to live your dreams, because your dreams are really who you are.
Ah, beautiful closing message. And thank you so much, Darryl, for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for your brilliant interview and the opportunity to share these ideas with people and the work that you're doing. I deeply appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And thank you to all our listeners tuning in to Embracing What is Real. I'm your host, Helane Lipson, sending love, light, and blessings to all. For more information about our upcoming shows, come see me at www.insightsbyhelane.com. Till we meet again, please remember you're a divine being and happiness and peace is your birthright. Namaste.